So the CheckMate 67T trial is an important trial because it addressed the question of subQ administration of Nivolumab. I think it is well established that subcutaneous administration of oncology drugs is highly important. It has been assessed in other tumor settings, especially in heme malignancies, but as well as in breast cancer with HER2 inhibitor. And then it came to checkpoint inhibitor, starting with atezolizumab actually in lung cancer. And the 6070 trial is the first trial for GU malignancy, and it is restricted to patients with renal cell carcinoma. So the big picture of the study is the following. It's a phase 3 study, a non-inferior phase 3 study that compares subcutaneous nivolumab versus nivolumab single agent as well, IV administered. And as it is single agent, the trial has been developed in patients who had failed at least one prior VEGF TKIs. So it is a second, third line study, single agent nivolumab IV versus the subQ administration. And so the study is a non-inferiority study with a co-primary PK endpoint, which is the average concentration of the drug and the semen steady state assessment, so PK endpoints assessed for non-inferiority. But it also has been designed to address the question of activity. And so it has also been designed to be powered to assess response rate within the two arms, IV versus subQ. And then there are other secondary endpoints such as disease control rate, PFS, and overall survival, and of course, safety. And so it's a large international study, about 17 countries, 73 sites took part. Patients were enrolled in a 1-1 randomization between the two arms. And overall, about 250 patients per arm have been treated as part of the trial. So the key finding is that study met its co-primary endpoint, demonstrating a PK non-inferiority between nivolumab subQ versus IV on the two PK endpoints that I mentioned. But not only was non-inferior, but interestingly, the PK exposure actually seemed higher in patients who were treated with the subQ formulation of nivolumab. So that's for the PK endpoint, but it is also true that the activity endpoint were similar in the two arms. Median PFS, this is single agent, second, third line, was 6.3 months for the subQ versus 5.6 for the IV, so actually a bit higher. Of course, no statistical difference, but also the response rate was trending towards the Nivo subQ, 26.6, this is single agent again, second, third line versus 20.6 for IV. So this is favoring numerically the subQ arm in the trial. And so this study is important because this is the first GU assessment of a subQ administration of a PD-1 inhibitor. It has met the co-primary endpoint of the PK endpoint, and with regard to safety, there was no new signal in terms of safety. But when you assess subQ administration, there is both the immune-related adverse event. You want to make sure your patient doesn't have higher immune-related adverse event. And the response is there was no added toxicity with the subQ administration. And the second thing is about the local site reaction as well. And only grade 1, 2 local site reactions were identified in the Nivo subQ arm. It was about 7% of the patient. None of them were grade 3, 4. All of the patient had recovered, and this did not impact subsequent use of the Nivo subQ administration. One last thing I need to stress is that the subQ administration is actually considered every 4 weeks, while the comparator arm, the standard arm, IV, was 3 milligrams per kg, as it has been initially developed, every 2 weeks. So IV was every 2 weeks, subQ was every 4 weeks. So taken all together, it is a non-inferiority study, demonstrated subcutaneous administration is safe, active, with clear PK endpoints being met And with regard to early activity endpoint, response rate, PFS, it is also demonstrating that we are doing as well as in IV administration. So it's very likely that this study will actually be practice changing, because it means that we will be able to integrate nivolumab subcutaneous after approval by our authorities worldwide. So what has been interesting to us, physicians involved in the trial, is that indeed we saw actually even a higher exposure for the subQ arm. We could capture that on the two PK endpoints that were the co-primary endpoints, but it's also true in terms of PFS and response rate, although not statistically significant. So I think it is clearly depicting the fact that we are properly exposing our patient to nivolumab with this new modality. So I think subQ administration provides an alternative that is highly relevant, both from a patient perspective, but also a healthcare provider perspective. Because for patient, it means that you may not need to have IV vein port. It also provides more flexibility, reduced time in the hospital, for instance, and very likely to be perceived as a benefit in terms of quality of life. With regard to the care team, so healthcare provider, worldwide, infusion rooms are quite packed. It is important that we're able to reduce the time that the patients spend in the hospital, both from the patient side, but also in terms of our health resource. We need to optimize the occupancy of our infusion centers, and that allows to have more time for treating more patients or provided more supportive care around the patients with less time in the IV infusion room. So to me, it reduces the administrative burden. It also gives flexibility, because usually when you have a 30 minutes or 60-minute IV administration, this is sometimes scheduled within the day at a fixed timing. It is not the same if it's a 5-minute subQ administration. It's a walk-in, walk-out strategy. The drugs can be prepared and it's a flat dose, so it's very convenient. The patient basically walks in, has the administration, and walks out at the convenient time for him or her within the day. So I think it is of high relevance, both from the patient, but also the hospital system itself.